recording.
Thanks. My name is Ed Nardi, Chair of the Natural Resources Commission, and I am calling this public meeting to order at 7 p.m. In accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order of March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. To ensure public access to the deliberations of the meeting, the public may access this call through video conferencing or telephone. Following the presentation, excuse me, by the petitioner and questions from the commission, members of the public will have the opportunity to ask questions and provide public comment. Please identify yourself with name and address for the record. You can also raise your hand from your phone by dialing *9 and use *6 to unmute. All video screens will be turned off with the exception of the commissioners, Delia, and the current petitioner. Once the commission has acted on an application, the petitioner is free to leave the meeting. Screen sharing will not be permitted unless absolutely necessary, and all votes will be taken by roll call vote. In the event of any technical difficulties, all matters on the agenda that have not been heard will automatically be continued to the April 20th NRC meeting. At this time, I would ask the commissioners to introduce themselves. Greg?
Greg Higgins.
Gary?
Gary Kleiman.
Nick?
Nick Pappas.
And Sarah?
Sarah Grimwood.
Thank you all. All right, so first on the agenda this evening is actually 3 sets of meeting minutes, February 2, February 16, and March 2nd. I'll be abstaining from the February 2nd and February 16th vote on these as I was not at the meetings. So any comments beyond administrative or things of that nature?
No, they look good to me.
Same with me.
Okay,
Same here. I read them. They all look great.
yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
Move that
Well
we
done,
accept
Karen.
all three. I move that we accept all 3 minutes with any minor edits.
Second,
Okay, and why don't we take a vote on the February 2nd and 16th, and we'll take a separate vote on the March 2nd meetings. So February 2 and February 16th. Greg,
aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and Sarah,
Aye.
thank you. And for the March 2nd meeting minutes, Greg,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Thank you, guys. So next item on the agenda is entitled Commissioner Comments, which really is directed at the 2229 Main Street Site Remediation Update. And I think with this, I know Delia, you got kind of a little bit of a heads up to kind of get the Natural Resources Commission kind of, more kind of fully at least engaged in the conversation and the update of what's going on currently at the site as part of the remediation plan. And, I think perhaps I might turn this over for the moment to Gary and Nick, who I think either by way of planning board or perhaps Nick, you might have been on the committee, have a little bit better knowledge of that. If you want to just kind of introduce perhaps if you know where the update's at in terms of remediation, and we can talk a little bit about some of our goals that I think we had touched upon maybe 6 months ago or thereabouts. Delia, if that's the right time frame, where we had a presentation from the group in terms of the proposed remediation and thoughts of where, our interests may lie in terms of the ultimate redevelopment of the site. So
Right.
Gary or Nick, if you have something to add, that would be appreciated.
Well, let's see, I prepared a memo, which Delia has not been sent out yet, right? To the commissioners?
So that's correct. It can't be distributed because it's not in compliance with open meeting law. So
But it can
yes,
be
so if you can
distributed.
present what those thoughts are, that would be great.
Okay, and you can distribute the memo after the meeting. Yes? Yeah, okay, great. I'm going to go over the high points in the memo, rather not read the whole thing because it would take a while. So at this point, the site, let's see, Gary can talk about where it is in the town acceptance, a little bit more involved in that. Early on the site, remediation of groundwater was identified as a serious issue, and they've been doing remediation now for at least a couple of years, I think. And the results have been good, and better than expected in some places. And so that's proceeding well. Right now, this summer, the contractors are going to, I'm going to read some of this. The contractors will begin staging the remediation of the contamination present in soil, sediments, and below the foundations at the site. The contaminants include uranium particles, PCBs, and other toxic chemicals. Most of these are being removed and disposed off the site. Some uranium contaminated material that is collected below the old holding basin. And Adelia, do you have the slides, those 2 slides showing the site I'd mentioned? You don't have them? That's okay.
I don't have those prepared, but I can pull them up as you're talking. Just give me a minute.
Yeah, it's just, I think it was the first and third slides in that deck that we had from Pam a couple of weeks ago. At any rate, so I just wanted to show you. So there's this bog that's down below the hill, right? The hill, on top of the hill was building and parking lots. Below the hill, towards Concord Center is where the bog and the wetlands are. Adjacent to the bog, there was a holding basin and a cooling pond. And those were significantly contaminated with various things. And that's going to be one of the focuses in the work right now. And because those are adjacent to the bog, there's something we should have concern about. So the site contains the sphagnum bog and wetlands that the Natural Resources Department is interested in accepting. There's significant, great, that was good. Okay, so on the right here, to the right of the arrow, that's where the bog is. And there's the cooling water recharge pond, and below that is the holding basin. And there are various contaminants in them. There are some contaminated areas within the bog, but there's no exposure pathway to the contamination that poses a risk to human health. And remediating that small area would destroy significant portions of the bog. So that's an issue. The bog will not be remediated, but it's stable and people won't be going into it. So hopefully that's okay. Ground penetrating radar discovered underground metal objects adjacent to the bog. They dug test pits to find out what was there. What they found was small fragments of metal fencing that had been between the bog and the holding pond and the cooling water pond. So that was deemed not to be a problem. Extensive remediation is planned for the contaminated areas adjacent to the bog. Some of the contaminated areas outside the bog are outside the bog, but within the wetlands. Based on Natural Resources Department delineation that was done prior to EPA involvement, these areas may also become staging space for cleanup of the holding basin. Areas where trees are removed or flat paths are created may connect to the trails on the site in the future. So it's important to be mindful of locating them close to sensitive areas. Upslope from the areas mentioned above is a flat area where there were buildings and paved parking lots. Some work will be done in this area, and the contractors plan to do some work to handle the stormwater. We do not have details on the stormwater management plan, but the contractors have mentioned that they may use the old cooling pond for drainage if possible. It would be good if the town could influence this plan so that the drainage plan does not create problems for future development. And stormwater drainage, if badly done, could adversely affect the bog and wetlands, but especially the bog. So those are things to just know about. Adelia, you're planning a site visit sometime soon.
So that is something that I think the commission should talk about tonight. DeMaximus, who is the contractor that has been involved in this project for the past 20 years. Bruce Thompson is the LSP with DeMaximus. He is on site, I think, every Wednesday. And so if the commission would like to schedule a site visit for an upcoming Wednesday, I think that would be very beneficial. They are, as Nick said, they're sort of ramping up now towards, remediation activities increasing as we get closer into the summer. So if we can do this in the next month, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea. I am not familiar with the site. I haven't been on site, so it's as good as the plans are, laying eyes on it would be beneficial, I believe. How do the other commissioners feel?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I would just offer a little bit of additional context in that I agree. I think now is the time probably for the NRC to engage, understand what the cleanup plans are, because while you're going to hear a whole lot about this as residents of the town of Concord over the next 4 or 5 years or more, as we consider what the opportunities are, what the barriers are, and what the prospect is of redeveloping the site. The fact is, we've spent a long time doing, careful studies and analysis of what the pollution at the site is and designing a remediation. And we are now at the point where the cleanup itself, forget about future development, but the cleanup is about to begin. And so I think that it's probably important for us to at least represent nature on the western half of the site, where the cleanup itself could have implications for nature. And, the natural areas and the portions where I was on the NMI reuse committee, and the recommendations of the committee are that the entire basically western half of the site remain natural with some walking trails and recreational opportunities and so forth. But to the extent that we want it to remain natural for future town use, it's probably a good time for us to weigh in, understand how the cleanup has been designed and what the implications of the cleanup would be for those natural portions of the site.
Thank you,
Yes.
Gary.
Yeah, there's still time to influence what's going to happen this summer and beyond.
Okay, so with that, and Delia, you said it's Wednesdays is the optimum time to visit? Okay, so why don't, Delia, after the meeting, would you circulate, a couple of, dates so the commissioners can, we can choose a date that works for everyone?
Yes. So I'll shoot out some dates. Next Wednesday is April 13th. The next is April 20th, and the following is the 27th. If there are any of those dates that don't work for people that right off the bat, just let me know. Otherwise, I think what I'll do is just send around a doodle poll.
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't do the 20th. I'll just throw that out.
Okay, thank you. Okay, very good.
Okay, very
you.
good. Delia, director's update?
Just very briefly, we had very good participation in the Concord cleanup. So a lot of trash that has been picked up, and crews are going around and picking up those yellow bags. And we will be doing a garlic mustard pull in May. So that will be the next sort of townwide event. And then the other, just last thing is Cooler Concord. There will be a sustainability festival on April 30th at the library on the front lawn, with a number of different activities and events. And we will be there with a table talking about pollinator plantings and invasive species. Thanks. That's it.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on. We have a couple of continuances. I think we have 2 to the April 20th without discussion. Actually 3. So could I have a motion to continue those 3 applications?
Do we need to do it separately because 2 have to be opened? Or can we do all 3 together?
Let's see, one is, I'm sorry, Sarah. Yep, one is open and continue. Those would be the first 2. Thank you. And the third one would be just continue.
Okay, I make a motion to open and continue to April the 20th without any discussion. 228 Park Lane, DEP file 1371595, and 99 Dalton Road, DEP file 1371594.
Second.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. And the vote, Greg?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
And I am an aye as well.
And I make a motion to continue to April the 20th without discussion. 61 Black Duck Road, DEP file 1371578.
Second.
Second.
Thanks, Greg. And we'll take the vote. Greg?
Aye.
Gary, Nick,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. So that brings us to our first new application of the evening. Notice of intent, 286 Barrett's Mill Road, DEP file number 137-1590. And who will be discussing that with us this evening?
Hi, everyone. This is Andrea Kendall with LEC Environmental Consultants. I will be presenting, and then with me tonight is the project team, Chris Rachinsky and Dan Gordon from Dan Gordon Landscape Architects, Ben Minix from Eagle Brook Engineering, and then we have the property owners, Heather and Stephen Fredette. I am wondering, is it possible for me to share my screen, Delia? I think I have some aerials that I think would be helpful to
Yep, I
facilitate
can,
this.
hold on one second.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Delia, I've been pulling up our garlic mustard, just I thought I'd add.
Good going. Great, so all right, hopefully this came up and everyone can see the screen. So the project before the commission tonight is to provide new and upgraded site amenities associated with the single family house, and with the ultimate goal to provide a new improved outdoor living experience, as well as creating a more seamless opportunities for the homeowners and their family, their children, to explore the natural resources at the site. So I thought I would start the bird's eye view, and then get a little deeper to get ground level views, and then I can transition to the plans. I think it'll just help facilitate that conversation if everybody's amenable to that. So this is 286 Barrett's Mill Road. It's located on the north side of the road. If people are familiar, this is the Rod and Gun Club to the north, and their open space areas. To the south is some more conservation land, and I'll show on the next screen that the Sudbury River is further south of this locus here. The property is 2.5 acres in size, and the existing house is located within the southeast corner. They have lawn and landscaped areas all around the house, and the main hydrologic resources associated with the property includes a Spencer Brook that flows southeasterly along the western property boundary, and then another unnamed brook that is, I think, sometimes known as Gates Brook, that flows on site into the pond, and then through an outlet or an inlet control structure, concrete, and then it flows back out. I will show you some more details of that, but thought it worth noting the on-site resource areas include, excuse me, I'm gonna just, here's another bird's eye view of the house, the existing driveway. There is an existing patio to the north, and that's part of the improved project improvements. There's an existing elevated deck and some patio areas at each of the egresses here. There is an you can kind of see it right here, and I'll show you on the ground photos of it. There is an existing shed with deck that is within the in this portion of the site. The existing lawn in this stretch functions as the subsurface septic system, the leach field, and the holding tanks, etc. So this is a turned view. To the right is north, to the left is south, but the river comes in to the pond and then immediately exits. There is a fringing wetland system that occurs along the river system and around the pond, and then it comes back out in this stretch and borders Spencer Brook. So the buffer zones include the 25-foot no disturb zone, the 50-foot no build zone. It includes the 100-foot buffer zone. It includes the 200-foot riverfront area from the brook. The 100-year floodplain also occurs on the site. And I think that's about it in terms of resource area. So it covers the whole gamut. And I'll show you the existing conditions plan a little later, but I just wanted for you to get a feel of existing site conditions, just to facilitate what is happening on the property. The next series of photos shows the backyard. There's an existing patio here, and this is the elevated deck, and below that is the stone beneath that and the support structures. The floodplain kind of creeps up in here and then back down. So that'll be important as part of our discussions a little later. On the lower right-hand screen, you might see the orange wetland flag. So you can also see that this portion of the property is located the closest to the resource area. In the background, there are two doors which serve as backyard egresses to the backyard. One is on the elevated deck, and then here's just more of a landing area. Another view, wetland flags that come up into this finger-like area, and just another overview. This is the end of the wetland delineation. To the right is Barrett's Mill Road, and I wanted to just point out there's a little bit of a paved little piece of a driveway apron that provides access from the rear. It's no longer utilized, but here's the grass area that a vehicle could go back into the rear yard. This is the back of a house where there's lawn abutting the house, and that will be part of the project area as well as all around here with respect to improving landscape plantings. And another view, this is the large pine, and this will be part of the project area. So just want to keep going. The backyard is very flat. The septic system in leach field is in roughly this location. In the back, you might be able to, can't really see, but back here is that shed. Here's another view of the shed. This is a portion of it is located currently within the 50-foot no build zone. And the trees around here, a few of these will is part of the proposed project to remove them to support the proposed swimming pool. And then just an overview of one of the trees that will be removed that is dead. A quick overview of the pond. Currently, this was constructed sometime between 1940 and 1957, based on review of the historic aerials. There is an existing embankment here separating the pond from the river that's on the other side of it. And there's an existing path that goes around the pond and then around this the top of this embankment, and then comes, I'm gonna just skip ahead, and then comes out on the right. And these two are kind of straddling both areas, but this is the concrete inlet control structure. And then the water and pond, it goes into the pond, but then the water exits right adjacent to the concrete vertical wall. Currently, the owners, to make that pedestrian loop around the pond, they utilize the concrete wall and kind of meander to some impromptu planks to complete the loop. And this is also part of the project area. So I just wanted to show you some visuals. The bank in this area is comprised of the concrete wall. There's vegetated land underwater. And then on this side, where my colleague is standing, is just more herbaceous vegetation along the bank. So this is the record plan, and I just wanted to, this is not colorized. The other plans that I will be showing have some color, so it will be easier to see. But I just wanted to show you the whole site with the resource areas delineated and where the corresponding buffer and riverfront area is coming from. So the top of Spencer Brook, the bank of that, the mean annual high water was delineated, and that places the 200-foot riverfront area from its closest point of the bank. It pretty much encompasses the whole property. And same for the buffer zone that extends off of this wetland line here, and that places the buffer pretty much inclusive of the whole property. And then along here at its closest there. So I just wanted to show you that. This is the color version of it. The blue is the 200-foot riverfront area. And then the second blue line is the 100-foot riverfront area, or the inner riparian zone. The 100-foot buffer zone extends around here, so it's pretty much the whole site. The 50-foot no build zone includes proximate to the house, the existing patio, the existing elevated deck, and other landing areas, and some of the existing landscaping areas around the house. And then it includes, as I mentioned earlier, the footprint of the existing shed and deck in front of there. There's also an existing compost pile located in this portion of the site to the right. And then relative to the 25-foot no disturb zone, there are also existing features within that zone as well, including the elevated deck, most notably, what else is there? I think that's about it. The floodplain elevation corresponds to elevation 121, and it is kind of a bold line type, but in terms of the existing house, it comes up underneath the deck and then wraps back around and then extends here. So that's it's located proximate to here. So there are a few components of the proposed work. I thought I would start from proximate to the house and then head north. The adjacent to the house, the objective is to remove this elevated deck, remove the platform here, remove some of the hardscape there, and create a more expanded patio area more durable stairs going down. You know, the deck has, it's wood, so it has its own lifespan that would have to be upgraded whatever, however many years. But the goal here is to create something more durable. And by removing that, there are opportunities to renaturalize the area in the backyard and renaturalize and enhance some of the features back here. There will be some stone pavers that come out. We are also providing, and I will zoom in a little bit more, to accommodate the additional impervious surface. There's going to be an area drain and a subsurface infiltration area to infiltrate whatever runoff will be generated from that with during high events, there was an opportunity for an overflow from there. They are proposing an enclosed vegetable garden, improving some just some outdoor pedestrian movement throughout the property. And then improvements to the circulation, pedestrian circulation throughout the site. They're going to make a little bit of a vegetated lawn pathway that can provide more circular movement around the house, a new stone wall and a break in that to provide pedestrian access from Barrett's Mill Road. So a lot of smaller landscape type improvements there. Working east, or excuse me, north or right of the plan, the goal is to put in a proposed pool and a pool house, utilities connecting to the pool, to the equipment, pool equipment station here will be tied in from the house. And because of its footprint and coinciding with the existing driveway and existing patio area, those areas will be replaced and reconfigured a little bit proximate to the entranceway. This pool house has been pulled back, or the proposed pool house will be pulled back so that it's located outside the 50-foot no build zone. And then around it, there will be a gravel to allow for infiltration from the runoff from the pool house. And then the pavers around the pool and runoff and any pool management, discharge of some of the water will be, well, the runoff will be directed and pitched so that it goes behind the house and to a proposed rain garden swale feature. That compost pile will be relocated from within the 25-foot no disturb zone to outside the 25-foot no disturb zone. And then a woodland path will be created to access the compost pile, and then a proposed footbridge over the river to access the bermed pathway there. In terms of the proposed, currently the lawn does extend below the trees in here. The goal is to remove that lawn and establish a new edge of lawn. And I'm gonna get to show you that, more of the landscape. And before I do, I just thought as an aerial basis, just to kind of show you the scale and scope of what we're doing. This patio will fall within the existing footprint of the disturbed area associated with the deck, where where that decking is being removed. And though there is an expansion to the north and west of it, and with a retaining wall and stairs, and it shows a little bit of the grading for that. Let's see, I want to show you. So in terms of the landscaping, there's numerous areas where landscaping will be proposed, native landscaping that will really kind of blend the house and tie it down to the naturalized adjacent areas. In terms of mitigation, we are required to provide the mitigation for the new impervious surface occurring above and beyond existing for the work within the 100-foot, 50 to 100-foot buffer zone. And that's generally for the work associated with the pool house and pool. And we are providing more than one-to-one mitigation by removing the lawn area, establishing a new understory with ferns and other herbaceous cover, and then shrubs and native trees, all in this zone. So that's our mitigation. But I do want to point out that all of the other plantings along the property boundary, throughout this area adjacent to the house that will be expanded on, all of these are native plantings. I think there's maybe a couple of species, I don't remember where they are, that aren't native. They might be more focused on the front of the house. So that's it in respect to the mitigation. I do want to share with you with respect to the impacts to the floodplain. There are two main areas where floodplain will be impacted, associated with the patio and stairs and a little bit of the grading. Those are the areas in the orangey hue. And though compensatory flood storage will be provided in areas of blue, where the grading will be shifted back. And this is our compensatory flood storage. We're actually providing more flood storage greater than a 1-to-1. And these calculations were reviewed and confirmed by Ben Minix, the project engineer. In terms of overall net gain, loss of work within and outside the 25-foot buffer, overall there's a decrease in impervious surface. If we don't take into consideration the footbridge, there's even greater than 8 square feet of impervious surface removed. Overall, there's a reduction in lawn and an increase in naturalized areas. Some of the lawn is outside the proposed lawn edge is going to be, that lawn will be removed and then vegetated with a native conservation seed mix. The same holds true for the area between 25 and 50 foot. We are decreasing the amount of impervious surface, decreasing the amount of lawn, and then increasing the naturalized vegetated areas. And then finally, within the 50 to 100 foot buffer zone. We are increasing that impervious surface, but as discussed, we're providing mitigation to compensate for that. And then in terms of the riverfront area compliance, we still remain below the 10% square feet that may be allowed of work for this lot. At this point, if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer some of the more specifics of that presentation. I know maybe I went through that fast. I don't know. It seemed like a long time.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you for the presentation. And, you know, a fair amount to digest on site, you know, a lot of pieces to it. So appreciate the walkthrough. I guess I'll just start off a little bit with a couple of comments, and I think probably staff may have passed these on to you. Obviously, there's some engineering comments from, you know, the engineering division as well. You know, in regard to the floodplain storage plan, I guess there's a question that's arisen in terms of how that's calculated. And I think that it's been asked that probably is calculated perhaps by per the notes, that the overall cut and fill should be done in an AutoCAD specific program to better capture the actual, you know, cubic footage. Because there's some concern that maybe some of this is determined by square footage and not cubic footage. And perhaps one of the engineers could speak to that, but I think that was a comment that was apparent in our review.
Yes, thank you. Ben Minix with Eagle Brook Engineering. So I did go through these floodplain storage calculations with Chris from Dangor Landscape Architects. And we did use AutoCAD to calculate all these areas that are shown on this plan that's on the screen. And so the way we do this is take your elevation between 120 and 121. So that's a group 1 foot below the flood storage elevation. All those areas that are being changed within that elevation interval, 120 to 121, is a total area, say 100 square feet. And then at a 1 foot change in elevation, that's 1 foot times the square footage, makes it 1,000 cubic feet. So that's that elevation interval. You do that on a foot by foot basis. So we calculated at each interval within the work area. So that table that's on the screen, you have 3 elevation intervals below the floodplain storage elevation of 121.
Could you move in on it? Could you expand that so we can see it? It's quite small.
And I think the question, Ben,
Thank you.
perhaps, and again, maybe I have more to learn, but the question is, do you really take it, you know, in whole cloth between, say, 119 and 120 and calculate that? But if the grading's only happening halfway between 119 and 120, wouldn't you just take from where you start, or the halfway distance, 119 and a half, and run that to 120 on that type of a slope? And that's where you get your cubic footage from. You wouldn't necessarily take the whole 119 to 120 to figure that cubic footage,
Right.
would you?
I think I understand what you're saying. And in some cases, I will create a proposed model in AutoCAD where, you know, you're really nitpicking spot grades down.
Yeah,
to
I think it's got to
tenth
be.
of a foot.
Yeah.
We're talking such a small storage gain. To do that, if you make one small change, you're fluctuating 100 cubic feet, and really in the grand scheme of things, this net gain is, I would consider, negligible to flood storage gain.
Yeah.
Which you're showing that we're meeting it.
Yeah, although it might be negligible, I think that's the perhaps, and again, Delia, feel free to weigh in, but I think that's typically how we'd look at that in terms of it being more exacting to where the actual grading is happening within the contours, and then calculating it out within those 1 foot increments.
Right. So if Andrea, if you can go over to the left-hand side of the screen there. At that.
There you go, upper left, yeah.
Yeah, the upper left to show the flood. Right, so at that lower contour where you've got between the 118 and the 119, that area is correct, where you have calculated that there's 18 square feet of flood storage being created, but it's only a couple of inches. It's not a foot. So it's 18 square feet times, 3 inches of flood storage. So I think what the commission, what we're used to seeing, two things. One is that, first of all, these plans are not on a landscape plan. It's on a site plan that's stamped by, a PLS or a PE. And those calculations, what seems to be provided is that those areas are correct, but it's not accounting for the volume. And so that needs to be rectified. And engineering had the same comment. I'm not sure if that information was relayed back or not. That came out on Friday. So, when I had provided the initial set of comments, it really was that the landscape plans should be the landscape plans, but the site plans that include all of the site work, including flood, fill, and comp storage, that should be on the site plan prepared by the engineer or surveyor.
Okay, we can address that, and maybe in certain areas we can provide cross sections to better explain that if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
that-
so do you see what I'm saying about that between the 118 and the 119, where you've captured 18 cubic feet of fill in the table, but what the engineers looked at it and they said that's, they ran the numbers and they said that's 18 square feet of fill, but you can't count the whole foot because you're not going from the 118 to the 119 contour. You're only going a few inches below the 119.
I understand what you're saying, yes.
Okay,
So we'll address
great.
it.
Great, thank you.
That's great. Thank you as well. And of course, a couple, just to note a couple other things. I think there are some, the mitigation, in the 50-foot no build zone has to kind of be trued up. I think there were some plantings and suggested that cover a certain amount by our proposed, spacing, 5 feet for shrubs, 10 feet for trees, etc. So there'll have to be some additional plantings back there to kind of meet the requirements. Some trees that are being removed, of course, and there's only a limited number of trees being proposed to be replaced back there. I think there was 3, and some additional ones, 3 witch hazel, which are really shrubs, not trees. So those would be planted a different kind of ratio of planting. And then I just had a question about the deck next to the house, if you wouldn't mind. So you're replacing the entirety of that deck with a new configuration of deck off the house.
Correct.
And does the existing deck, I can't recall, does that extend all the way back to the other portion of the house?
Maybe it's easier to see.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah. So this is the existing deck in here, and the goal is to expand this section.
Yeah.
Back there.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
And
All right.
I guess one other thing I just want to add, with the removal of the 11 trees, in terms of quantity, there's going to be 25 new trees planted. I think I have that in my notes somewhere, but and I think
Only
it's-
11 are in our jurisdiction, I believe.
11 of the trees
Right,
that
so-
are being
so-
removed.
Yeah.
Yep, so you're removing 11 trees within jurisdiction, including 1 dead one.
Mhm.
And then you're noting that 6 trees will be replaced, but you're double counting. So actually, I think you're counting the 3 hemlocks and 3 witch hazel as the replacement trees. And witch hazel are shrubs, they're not trees, so they wouldn't count anyway. But those 3 trees that are being removed should be looked at separately from, the mitigation area is meant to provide mitigation for the increase in the impervious surfaces within the outer buffer zone.
Mhm.
So that's one calculation. That's the 27, or whatever that number is, 2,700 or something. But then those 11 trees that are being removed should be replaced in addition to that
Mhm. Okay.
mitigation for the impervious.
Okay, I will look at that further. I don't know if Dan or Chris can provide some input on that. I'm just, for some reason, I can't find the tree. We do
Well,
have a tree table in
Andrea,
here.
Dan
Yeah.
Gordon, as you said, there's 25 trees that are being planted on site, right? So it's just that we haven't claimed credit for them. If I have that correctly, there's all of the plantings behind the proposed pool area, and there's additional trees around the garden area. So we're certainly not opposed to planting trees. We're trying to meet, I think, what Andrea identified as just a minimal amount of mitigation, but there's much more really conversion of lawn and additional plantings that's being done. And we didn't really count it, but it's identified on the plan. So if we haven't met the mitigation requirements, if this plan doesn't meet those, we certainly we'll achieve that.
Okay. And one question I had was in regard to the impervious. There's a comment from, I believe it's engineering, about the pool and how it's determined to be impervious. So is that how you calculated it as well?
So the pool is considered an impervious surface, but
Okay.
as far as what I typically look at as a pool, yes, it's an increase in impervious area, but it's not an increase in runoff, because typically with a pool, you'll have maybe an 8-inch freeboard elevation between your water surface and the top of the coping. And so if you get a 1-inch rainfall event, and then you have a week of dry weather over the summer, a lot of that evaporates. And so that storage is available. Now, if you get a 100-year storm where you're over 8 inches of rain, yes, you're going to have some overflow, but in calculating the required storage for the rain garden and swale, you're not going to get any runoff from that area, so it doesn't impact the volume of runoff to the design point in the wetland area.
But just to interrupt it, impervious surfaces have to do with runoff, but they also have to do with the fact that nothing's growing there and nothing will grow there. I mean, it's an impervious surface, so it's not just water runoff that we would look at with impervious, isn't that correct?
Well, we've accounted for that in terms of the mitigation that we're providing for the plantings and the conversion of the lawn to that feature, correct?
Mhm. Yeah, I just want to say that it's not just saying, well, the pool holds the water, ergo there's no other issue there. That's not true.
Yeah.
Right. I just thought I understood the engineering comment as it relates to calculations for flood, not flood storage, but runoff calculations. And so that's how I tried to address the comment.
No, I understand. That is one feature of it. But
Yep.
it does take up a square yards of surface.
Correct. Yes.
But as I understand the comment from engineering, if I'm reading it correctly, it also says that they, again, the 100-year storm or whatever it might be, there may be some overflow again. And I think they were looking for, perhaps increasing the rain garden to perhaps offset that, if I'm reading that correctly. And
Correct. And I've already begun revising those calculations.
Okay.
That occurred after the submittal deadline for the revisions.
Okay. And lastly, just for my commentary, just if you could walk us through a little bit of the proposed bridge towards the back side of the property.
Thank you.
It seems like relatively substantial structure and certainly some of the underpinnings of it by way of the helical aspect of it, and I'd like to understand that more so.
Sure, I don't have the detail, I think, here, but so it's a 4-foot wide footbridge supported by helical piles. So the helical insulation using the helical piles creates, it's kind of screwed, it is screwed into the ground. So in this case, it will be screwed into the upland. It will be, there will be, at this point in the design, approximately 7 of the helical supports that are put into the land underwater to provide the supports. Once that's screwed in, it doesn't create, the process creates a very de minimis disturbance of land, both during construction and then after. It will be approximately 3.5 feet above the ground. And with the south-facing sun, onto the deck and the below the surface, there's, and I can show you some of the pictures. It's already a little bit of a shaded area, but with some southern exposure, I don't anticipate impacts to the ability for the vegetation below the decking to be impacted. And some of it goes, and let's go back to a
Do we
picture.
have the photograph of something similar?
I don't think I have that with me, but if Chris, you have that, I can.
How is this not a structure in the 25 zone?
It
And
is.
how
It is.
do we, how do you pass the
Well,
filing for that? I mean,
yeah.
it seems like it's a wonderful design and it will be a nice park back there and a walkway, but it just does seem to invite in more intrusion into the 25 and obviously
Mhm.
over the wetland. And it is that, how is that in the benefit? How do we
How do
How
we
do we-
justify it?
justify it? How do we get our head around saying, yeah, that's okay? I mean,
Yeah,
It's a boardwalk over an existing structure.
yeah.
I
So,
fully understand
well,
that, but
yeah.
it will entail, will it not, by its own nature, an incursion into the,
There's already a walk along the bank. It allows
Mhm.
for, it allows for a
Correct.
circuit loop, a nice
But
walk.
but I mean, it's expansion of that walkway, and that's the reason you're doing it, is to expand it, to make it more usable, ergo probably used more.
Mhm.
And is that, I mean, this is private property, I realize, but on the other hand, on the other side of the coin, where's the benefit to the public that you're going into the wetlands? And I'd like to see that, the waiver, how you meet the criteria of the waiver.
I think
so-
the people who live here, it's just a little safer because like our kids, we like to walk around the pond and we enjoy
Fully
it.
understand, fully understand.
It's a little
Our
safer
problem is
Over there.
constructing structures in the buffer zone and wetlands is a major issue on our part in terms of allowability. We pretty much deny them at most instances.
How, may I ask,
It's a tall hurdle to get over.
it is,
Go
but
ahead, Sarah.
I just wanted to ask, how you described that you're putting in, it sounds like almost poles for this structure,
So
should this
the-
go ahead. But how, do you need machinery on site to do that? How do you do it?
Just use an auger, like
An auger.
a rotating, you hold it, it's a handheld.
Got it, okay.
It screws in. So we use this technology for this application for boardwalks and docks. It's very low impact. If there could be other solutions, because we have a concrete foundation here, which we could simply bridge over and avoid it.
That's what I was
so
wondering.
if
Yeah,
we
do
don't
you,
have
do
to
you
get hung
actually
up
need
on
to,
the Mhm.
do you need to extend it over anything that isn't already the concrete structure?
We could look at that in detail. I mean, I think we're looking to do the least impact, just a very simple boardwalk to facilitate having to walk across an existing structure that's there.
Yeah, it's really,
That's all we're seeking to do.
the policy really is no structures, right? And you're actually in the wetland. You're not just in
Yeah.
the buffer zone. So, I mean, it's a huge hurdle to get over. If you were just putting something over an existing concrete wall, that would be one thing.
Yeah, that's what
But,
I'm wondering.
It's well beyond that.
So would
So-
would the commission find it helpful to do a site visit for this project?
I think it may.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot going on there. It's a very tight site in terms of the improvements where they're happening. And might be helpful to look at the quality of the wetland, but I would agree with the other commissioners' comments that it's a very high hurdle in regard to the, the 25 and frankly, into the wetland itself.
With respect to the Wetlands Protection Act, well, just looking at that, not considering the bylaw at this moment, that installation of footbridges, boardwalks, or the like, that is considered a limited project, where that could be allowed, notwithstanding the, they're essentially allowing those kinds of impacts to occur, with the understanding that sometimes getting across a resource area, and this is a private use, but it, as Heather conveyed, it does provide a safe access for the children, and it provides really a learning and opportunities for them as they grow and can appreciate the natural resources of their property further. So wanted to convey that as it relates to, the bylaw. We, with the other mitigation that we're providing, we're hoping that would be the balance with that, and we can talk about that further at the site walk, more at the tonight as well.
Okay. Any other comments from the commission this evening? Okay. Are there any comments from the public regarding this application? All right, seeing none at the moment. In regard to a site visit, I guess I'd ask Stephen and Heather, are there any preferred times that you could allocate for a site visit, just generally, and then we'll do, as Delia said previously, on another site visit, we'll do a kind of a poll among the commissioners, if you could give us some guidance in terms of what may work for you.
I think we're pretty flexible. I'm working from home primarily. So if we get it, I'm pretty flexible. Just have to move things around my calendar. So, but
Okay.
is it preferable sort of working hours or weekends, or early mornings, after? I mean, what's preferable for you all? I
I
guess.
think it's usually mornings that have typically been our norm in the past. And perhaps perhaps Monday through Friday, if that makes sense for the commissioners as well.
Yeah, so in that case, not that we necessarily have to both be here, but I think the kids are dropped up at school at 9, and so we would be usually back to the house around 9:30 to be safe, I would say.
Okay, that's fine. And certainly, if you guys have conflicts, you don't really have to be there. If it's okay for us to come onto the property, since it's all exterior, if you will. But that's good guidance for us. And Delia, are you good with that in terms of just polling us and trying to get a time put together?
Sure.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for the presentation. A few things to work through, and we'll look forward to the site visit. And with
Thank you so
that,
much.
and you're good continuing, I guess, perhaps maybe it's not next NRC, but perhaps the following, to allow for some site visit and of course, plan revisions as well. Does that sound reasonable? So two NRC meetings from now, if you will.
Okay. That's
Okay,
acceptable. Thank you.
thank you.
That would be
Edna.
May 4th.
May 4th. Thank you, Delia.
Is that right?
20th is the next one. Sounds
Right,
right.
May 4th. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
The next application, request for determination of applicability, 65 Aiden Drive, RDA file number 22-6.
Hi, my name is Robert Melvin from Stamsky McNary. I will be taking the hearing for the request for determination of applicability at 65 Aiden Drive.
All right. Do you have any, do you want to just give us a 2-minute overview, if you
Yeah.
will?
Sure.
Thanks.
So the proposed project is to build an addition off the northeast face of the building. And there is an intermittent stream to the north that has a bank along it. There was some debate whether there was bordering vegetated wetlands in the area. There was a site walk, I believe, a week or two ago, where the wetland scientist met with conservation members, and the conclusion was that there was no bordering vegetated wetlands on the site, and thus no buffer zone projected onto the site.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have a particular comment. Does any of the commissioners have any comments on this?
Nope.
Okay, very straightforward. Are there any public comments regarding this application?
Greg, I wondered, are you trying to talk?
Yeah, I was just, in terms of that plan, that you did recognize buffer zone off-site, yes? No?
Buffer zone
There-
from,
When you say there's no wetlands on the lot, it doesn't mean you're not within 100 feet of a wetland. My point is, nothing that you're going to do is within 100 feet of any wetlands. Is that?
that's correct. Yes.
That's a better way.
I
of
think,
saying it.
Greg, I think it probably would have been more accurate to say that there's an intermittent stream, but because there's no BVW associated with that stream, there is therefore no jurisdiction to that stream and then
Gotcha.
no buffer
Gotcha.
zone. Right, I
Thanks.
think that's what you were trying to get at.
That's, yeah, I was fumbling, but that's right.
All right, and I don't see any public comment, so I do believe we have a recommendation this evening. If someone wants to take that, Gary?
Sure, I'll move that we issue a negative determination number 1, number 4, and number 6 for 65 Aiden Drive, RDA file number 22-6. Confirming that the area is not within jurisdiction and that proposed work is not within an area subject to protection under the act, including the buffer zone or the Concord Wetlands bylaw.
Second.
Thank you, Sarah. And the vote, Greg,
I,
Gary,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
All right, the next application is notice of intent, 287 Lindsay Pond Road, DEP file number 137-1596. And,
Oops, sorry.
and Robert, you up again?
Yes, that would be
Okay.
me again. Okay, so here we have 287 Lindsay Pond Road. We're proposing a repair sewage disposal system to replace the existing failing system within the 100-foot buffer zone. The closest point to the buffer zone is actually 73 feet from the tank and 75 feet to the leaching field. Now, the site was very limited. We considered many different options to keep it well outside of the buffer zone there, but if you could just scroll up a little bit, I can explain a little further. So you can see there's testing on the top right of the plan, but we do have there's a ton of utilities there that are just in the way. It just wasn't possible to fit anything in between there with given the property line setbacks and the setbacks to those utilities. Over on the left side of the driveway, we couldn't put it there either because we could not test where the existing system was, as that is disturbed material. And anywhere else beyond that would just disturb more vegetation and trees, and we need to be mindful of the pond that's on the site and the shed that's there too. So this was really our only option, was to put it as we show it here. Are there any questions?
I don't have any questions. Looks fairly straightforward. Any of the commissioners have any comments, questions?
No.
Okay. Any comments from the public regarding the application? All right.
Ed, I
There
do
is-
see a hand
There's
up.
a hand up.
Oh, yes, George, please.
Hi, I've got 3 questions, and some of it is because of ignorance here. By the way, we welcome Gail's parents to the neighborhood. It's really nice to have extended families living close together. And I'm really sorry about the septic system. That's what happens with 1960s era buildings. My question first, I have 3 questions actually. First one has 2 parts. What is the purpose of the 100-foot buffer? And I say that because I really don't know. And the second part of the question is, assuming that there is a good reason for the 100-foot buffer, what is the justification for waiving the rule?
And Georgie, if you could expand on that, what rule are we waiving?
The 100-foot rule. I referred to the 100-foot buffer as the 100-foot rule just because I
Okay.
don't really know how to refer to it.
So Ed,
Well-
Ed, do you want me to take the first part of
Sure,
that
please.
question? So the 100-foot buffer zone is basically a protective zone around wetland resource areas. So science has shown that activities within the 100-foot buffer zone can damage wetland resource areas. So if you're putting in fertilizers or you're cutting all the trees, you can cause sedimentation of the wetlands, you can cause pollutant loading. So the reason for the 100-foot buffer zone is to sort of make sure that there's some buffer to that zone. And that's established under the State Wetlands Protection Act. They don't establish performance standards for the buffer zone like they do for other wetland resource areas. So it's a little bit of a free-for-all, but they've basically said to communities, we're implementing or we're establishing a Wetlands Protection Act. We expect that local communities will implement their own wetlands bylaws to further protect wetland resource areas. So Concord has a wetlands bylaw that has a 25-foot no disturb zone that the commission is pretty firm on, that anything within that 25 feet is exactly that. It's a no disturb zone, and activities within that area should be restorative in nature, period. The commission has a 50-foot no build zone policy, which is to prevent structures from being constructed close to wetlands. And then in the 50 to 100-foot buffer zone, we sort of look at it as a limited disturbance area where activities may be permitted. They will require mitigation. Septic systems, people need a septic system in order to have their home be a functional home on their property. So in that outer 50 to 100-foot buffer zone, as I say, the commission will approve activities after review. I think you've been on since the beginning. You saw some of the conversations around the mitigation requirements for new impervious that's being introduced into the outer buffer zone. And those are the sort of balances that the commission looks at to allow property owners to enjoy the use of their property, but also to make sure that the wetland resources areas are being adequately protected.
Okay, fair enough. the project narrative refers to a proposed driveway and sewage disposal system, although I guess that there may be outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So perhaps that's not a topic for this discussion anyway. Am I correct there?
There's no proposed driveway for this project.
Oh, because it says work within the 100-foot buffer zone. The third sentence says the proposed driveway and sewage disposal system are located outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. So I was confused by that.
But just to be clear, if the driveway is outside the 100-foot buffer, it is not under our purview unless it happened to be also within the Rivers Act or something of that nature. So
Okay, all right. So
stating that it's outside the 100-foot means that it's not applicable for us to review it anyway.
Fair enough, fair enough. And my third and last question is, how long is this project likely to last?
Robert, got an estimate for you?
I'd say we've gotten approval from the Board of Health already. So as soon as the homeowners get an installer, it could take I'm guessing a couple months, maybe the most, to put the system in.
And that includes, ancillary work, landscaping, and whatever else is likely to be part of the overall project.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
You good, George?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. All right, I don't see any other public comments. So I do believe we have an order of conditions for the project. Nick, you want to take that on? Do you have that
Trying to
handy?
find them. Hold on.
Okay, thank you.
When were they sent?
I think
I've got it.
I've
got it ready.
You got
Okay,
it,
Sarah,
Sarah?
go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay. I make a motion to close the hearing and issue an order of conditions for 287 Lindsay Pond Road, NOI file 1371596. Stating finding A, standard conditions 1 through 20 and special conditions 21 through 50.
Second.
Thank you, Greg. And the vote, Greg,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Thank you, Robert. Good
Thank
luck
you.
with the project.
Yeah, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, moving along. The next application, notice of intent, 80 Alford Circle, DEP file 137-1593. And who'll be discussing that with us this evening?
Good evening, Chairman Nardi, Commissioners Higgins, Kleinman, Pappas, Grimwood, and Director Kay. My name is Scott H. Gillis. I live at 80 Alfred Circle with my wife of 47 years, Lindsay M. Gillis. We have had the pleasure of taking care of this property for the past 33 years. It's a privilege to be able to talk to you this evening and seek approval to expand our existing sunroom, expand our existing garage, add a raised stone patio, and perform mitigation because the work will be done between the 50 and 100-foot buffer zone. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about our notice of intent submission.
All right, Delia, well, I guess I just perhaps just start with the proposed bio retention areas. I'm not sure if I understand those. They're shown as, rectangles or squares. They're not connected and really without grading on the plan. I'm not sure how they really work ultimately as well.
The term bioretention area could perhaps be substituted with the word rain garden. And I'd like to call your attention to the largest area in the bottom of the screen. And right adjacent to that, you will see a reinforced concrete pipe. That pipe delivers storm water from Alfred Circle along with snow and ice conditioning chemicals. That area is pretty much unvegetated and is constantly wet, heavily shaded, and provides no filtration of any significance to the adjacent wetlands. In an effort to try to protect our wetlands, we thought that a good mitigation plan would be to vegetate this area at the outlet of the reinforced concrete pipe. Prior to doing additional research to determine what genus and species of plants might be best, we spoke with Public Works engineer Stefan Schur-Deville, and I apologize, we didn't speak with him, we communicated with him by email. And the Public Works Department not only would allow such an activity, they actually encouraged it. They thought it would be beneficial for the wetlands. The square boxes around the reinforced concrete pipe are simply areas to quantify the amount of mitigation that we plan. The intent is not to build up any retention, if you will. Although if that's desirable, we certainly could do that. Rather, the intention is to take this unvegetated area and plant it with native plants in an effort to vegetate it and provide some filtering of the water that comes from Alfred Circle down into the wetlands.
Okay. So I think to note that, you know, if there are bioretention areas or rain gardens, you know, certainly a good idea, but I don't think they take the place of mitigation, you know, under our understanding. So, you know, again, moving forward with those, always a good idea, but again, they are not a substitute for mitigation in regard to the additional impervious.
May I ask what type of mitigation would be appropriate? Because we'd be happy to comply with whatever is required to mitigate the 573 square feet of additional impervious area that we are proposing.
Well, again, I don't think it's the commission's, you know, necessarily job to, you know, give you absolute direction, but typically you'd be taking up either some, you know, lawn area within jurisdiction in the, you know, in the lake jurisdiction and renaturalizing that with native plants, trees, etc., to meet the 573 square feet of additional impervious.
Down in that area, if we could go back to the plan. Delia, would you mind putting the plan up again? Just upland of the RCP is a small lawn area. And if it would please the commission, we would be happy to eliminate that lawn area and plant it with small shrubs, native shrubs and understory plants. They would look beautiful. It would eliminate some lawn area, but it would not provide any improvement, if you will, to the runoff from the road that at certain times of the year contains ice and snow chemicals. But if that is necessary to fulfill the mitigation requirement, we'd be glad to eliminate approximately 573 square feet of lawn area and plant it with native plants.
And again, I would just suggest that, that should be shown on plan. It should, demonstrate the 573 square feet. There should be a planting plan that's associated with that, with native species at the correct spacing. So I think the plan needs a fair bit more detail in order to, to account for that.
Yeah, yes, sir. The areas in boxes have genus and species, planting distances, and number of plants included in the narrative. I didn't realize that trying to filter water as it heads towards the wetlands was not considered mitigation. So my apologies for that.
No need.
And we would be pleased to supply a detailed plan associated with removing lawn area upland of the water outlet and planting it with something that is both beautiful to the eye as well as native.
Yeah, and I think, again, capturing it on the engineered plan is important. Again, it's the primary reference for not only, your builder, your work, and of course for the record as well. So
yes,
everything should be contained on the
that.
plan versus the narrative. That would be highly recommended.
Happy to do that. Any other questions?
We have contours on, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to say that also on the plan, I believe you're planning to control some invasive species. This would also need to be noted on the plan. Is Pachysandra that you're going to be removing?
If it's desirable to remove Pachysandra, that is, there is a small amount of Pachysandra that's closest to the wetlands. There's a lot of Pachysandra on the property, but there is a small area of Pachysandra close to the wetlands that I would be happy to remove.
So we would need the area marked out on the plan, so it's clear where that's going to be removed from, please.
Of course.
And I think there's a notation here, oh, go ahead, Nick, please.
I just wanted to say, I think we're very much supportive of your doing this area near the pipe. I mean, don't mistake what we're saying for dissuading you from that. It's a good project included.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it would not fulfill the mitigation requirements. So a more appropriate mitigation should be proposed.
Yes, yeah, both, yeah.
And then I think there's just a standard comment here that, erosion controls may want to be expanded to encompass the limit of work, but, obviously that can be further defined as you finish the plans. And then we can look at that final erosion control delineation.
Are you referring to the straw wattle that is proposed?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what is it additional that you need?
I think the suggestion was that it should, encompass all the work, on the plan, and here it's kind of just, I believe, just kind of a straight line, parallel with I guess the 25 wetlands. So, again, it may want to close off towards the house or the HVAC unit and then turn back up, just so it's, again, any kind of runoff is being more collected, not necessarily just directly downstream, perhaps.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just relatively straightforward, I believe.
Yep, that's not a problem at all.
We do not have any contours on here. One would assume, obviously, that water runs down into the wetland, ergo the house is higher than the wetlands. But I mean, we don't really have any contours to really judge whether
That's true.
I'm sure it's fine, but you get my point. We don't know what conceivably you could have an 8-foot grade change over 10 feet there and have it be really precipitous. We have no idea of knowing it other than knowing the area. That isn't the case, but typically we would have topos on here. Contours.
Yeah, I'm not a surveyor. I engaged a surveyor to put this plan together. And my understanding is there are some elevation lines, but I may be incorrect about that.
Well, I see 143.
I think that's
That's
a
a
distance.
distance.
That's a distance, Craig.
Yeah,
That's
Oh,
the
God.
distance.
I think
I'm sorry.
the only topo I think is the invert of the,
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see
Wait.
topos on the plan, sorry.
so Scott, if you pay someone to put some topography on here, you may want to have a discussion there. And again, all in all, it's a relatively straightforward process, but it may be helpful. And then lastly, I think there's just a staff comment that I think there's an existing DEP file that needs to be closed out. And typically upon final issuance of permits, we usually allow 6 months from the permit issuance to close out that older file. Just as a heads up.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean by that. Could you please provide a little more detail?
so when it's an old permit, so it's, but I think it actually was issued when the house was originally constructed. So that permit was issued in, I don't even know when it was. It was the early 80s. Does that sound right, Scott?
Well, the house was completed in 1989, so 33 years ago.
Mid-80s.
Mid-80s, right. So you just need to request a certificate of compliance to close that permit out. I can talk with you offline about that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Delia.
Any other go ahead.
Well,
Brett.
it's interesting that, we can eliminate 572 square feet of lawn. But it's interesting that we don't recognize a rain garden, everything that might filter salt water going into the marshland. It's kind of an odd thing. We don't do that. I mean,
So I think that's a good point. I think when this was, what we encourage people to provide stormwater or infiltration of roof runoff or new impervious surface runoff. But you're right, that's not what this is proposing to do.
right.
I think, I think those boxes need a lot more detail to them, Scott. And one of them is in the wetlands. You're going to have to remove some of that riprap, I think. I don't know what, the boxes don't really define very much of what the activity is for the rain gardens. They need to be sized to accommodate the flow that's coming into them from Alfred Circle, which, we don't have any information on whether that's been evaluated by an engineer or anything like that.
Yeah,
So
and
I think that's right. I think.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm sorry, Delia. Well, my understanding is that, that if that is not, as Commissioner Higgins suggests, acceptable mitigation.
Oh, I didn't say it wasn't, Scott. I said, my statement is that it might be a very commonsensical way of trying to prove mitigation for us. However, if you think of, you're going to hand that to a excavator type person that works the soil, and you don't really intend him to make 3 square boxes out in your yard. It's going to be contoured and look probably more kidney shaped, more like a dry pool. Well, that's what should show on the plan, and it should say this can take X amount of cubits of water runoff, and we're going to plant it with this kind of vegetation. And we're claiming, the homeowners are claiming, that that's to offset the 572 square feet, or help to offset the 572 square feet. I just want to say to the other commissioners, I could see that as a mitigating factor here, as opposed to simply just cutting out a piece of lawn and planting it. That was my statement. It's just that this is a very, this plan is the kind I would make to show what I wanted to do, but not to present it in a formal fashion to get approval. Because you can't build off of this plan. Are you with me?
Yes, so
It has to
Commissioner,
be the plan that is actually going to be used by the people working out there, so they can locate it, so they can do what the plan says.
thank you,
Right.
Commissioner Higgins. I'm really glad that you said what you just said. I agree with you that, in my humble opinion, doing the work at the reinforced concrete pipe will do more for the wetlands than cutting out a piece of lawn and planting it with native shrubs. So that would be my preference as a mitigation effort. That's number one. Number two, the reason it's not a detailed plan is virtually all of the landscaping on this property over the last 33 years has been done by me. And my plan is to get on my hands and knees, do minimal movement of soil, and with a hand trowel plant bare root, 150 or so bare root ferns of an appropriate genus and species to survive in that area. So you're totally right. The actual shape and the location of the plants can be further delineated if this is determined to be an acceptable mitigation. And it would be done by me by hand.
I just raised the questions truthfully, Scott, to the other commissioners to see whether they would buy in as a very practical way of doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would support it. I think, as you said, Greg, you would, in order to make sure it serves its intended purpose, you'd have to do some calculations to show that the water would be handled.
Correct.
And you'd have to calculate the volume. You'd have to get from the Public Works or somebody an estimate of the flow. There'd be some arithmetic involved and
Yeah,
that sort of thing.
yeah, and that's a fair question. It's a fair perspective from Greg. It's just a matter of, is that engineering and, and how to get those calcs, perhaps more work than 500 square feet of additional mitigation. Just a question for the homeowner, of course, Scott.
If you can, Scott, just stand on the other side of the fence and look at it from our standpoint, how would we know you did what you said you were going to do if we can't tie it to a plan, or if a neighbor called up and said, what's Scott doing in the backyard, and is he doing it in the right spot? I mean,
Yes.
You got to have a plan to refer to that's got some definition to it, X feet from here and Y and Z, and
Yes.
Are you with me?
So
Because that's what
I'm-
we normally
I'm to-
see.
I'm totally with you. Yes, sir. And I would propose the following. Because I am going to do the work myself on my hands and knees with a trowel, I would propose that I lay out the work with a rubber hose or some markers, little flags, something to show the exact location of the plantings, and that I photograph that, and then I provide detailed information of the genus and species of plant that would go in each section of that outline, so that you can see exactly what the proposed plan is, and then provide before and after photographs so that you could see that the work in fact had been completed.
I think, Scott, though, that that's good planning on your part to kind of get that sense and species and the fit of those plants within that proposed area, but all of that would have to be put on a plan.
Oh,
and be
yeah, I can have
as
that
well.
done.
Okay.
That's easy. I could just, once I do that work, I can simply provide it to the surveyor and ask him to plot it on the plan. Or maybe do a blow up of that section of the plan and plot it on the plan so it is more easily viewed by all parties.
You do need some calculations
Yeah.
too.
Yes, Commissioner Pappas, could you please tell me if the goal is to simply vegetate an area that is currently being deluged with water from Alfred Circle, what the
So for instance, you've got to anticipate what the flow is going to be, how much water is coming. You don't
Yes.
want to have the area inundated and overrun because then it wouldn't serve its purpose. So you've got to be sure that the amount of water coming down from Alfred Circle is not going to go past the capacity of the basin. And you also, ideally, you should know how quickly the water is going to soak into the ground so that you know ongoing flows, how they'd be handled. I mean, that's what we would expect from an engineer.
I think what he's really doing is taking an existing topography and simply planting it with some vegetation that will sort of neutralize whatever the salts, et cetera, coming off the street. It doesn't sound to me like he's actually making much of any swale, Nick. So it's like a dead area that he plans on planting. It's an interesting
Well,
concept.
so
but
I think the concern that I would have though is that, I mean, right now it's an outfall from the 80s. It's a rip-rap outfall, and presumably, I don't know if that's going to be dug up and then replanted. And then what
No.
about when you have
No.
a storm that comes through and it just washes out all the plants because there's nothing left to stabilize it? If it's just planting within the existing area, whether the stone stays, it's very difficult to establish any plantings there. I mean, I love the idea that you're thinking about this, Scott, but I just think that it needs to be looked at from, the standpoint of how this would work in a 2-year storm, a 10-year storm, a 100-year storm, which is, just a little bit more of an engineering exercise, but that's how these things have to be evaluated so that they function properly.
Okay.
I don't think it's just a matter of going in and putting in a few plants.
Okay, so I'm going to be happy to comply with whatever the wishes are of the commission. When I walked this area and when I walked it with the wetlands biologist, we noticed that the area was like muck. It is riprap. You can clearly see the path of the water, and you can see where the water pools during heavy rain. The genus and species of plant that I've selected for planting is good for constantly wet areas with shade, which is the condition of this location. I would be happy to talk with Public Works Engineer Sher DeVille and see if he can help me. But if not, I would be very happy to abandon this planting plan, remove lawn and plant shrubs, which would be, quite frankly, much easier for me to do.
Yeah, so I think you're hearing from the commission, you've got perhaps 2 pathways. One might be a little bit more arduous than on the engineering side perhaps, but I think as you talk that out with engineering, maybe that'll help clarify your approach.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I can say that engineering is not going to have the time to develop these calculations for you. Now,
Right.
they would love to help you as well, but they don't have the capacity to work on private projects as much
That's a
as they would like
third-party
to.
engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions?
A final comment, Scott, if I may, and forgive me if this has been mentioned already, but I think you were planning to include hostas in your planting, and they're not native. So that wouldn't, if you do go down that path for mitigation, that wouldn't actually meet our requirements.
Thank you very much for that observation. The hosta that I was planning on planting are some plants that I had previously, before this whole project, asked Director Kay if it would be okay if I put them adjacent to a lawn. And she responded by email that yes, hosta would be okay. So that's the only reason.
I'm sorry, Scott, just to clarify, that was one specific question about one plant. As Sarah said, hostas are not native. We would not consider them appropriate mitigation plantings.
Oh, okay, so does that mean that I shouldn't plant them, or they just wouldn't count towards mitigation?
They wouldn't count towards
Towards
mitigation.
mitigation.
Ah, okay, thank you. But
that's all.
yes, okay, thank you.
So, and I guess I would go a little further and say, I wouldn't suggest they get planted in, areas of the buffer zone, but that's, people love their hostas. My husband has ones from his aunt and his grandmother, and they keep popping up. And so, of course, but they're not native, and they really are more of a landscape feature, and not something that would be part of a naturalized wetlands mitigation planting.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Great.
So Scott, you've
Yes, sir.
heard some comments this evening. So would you like to continue this to next meeting, or perhaps a little further out? Based on some of the thoughts you have, or some of the options you have.
Yeah, I'd be pleased to continue it to next meeting. And if I may ask for just a little bit of guidance here. The questions have all related to the mitigation, not to the project itself. If we can come up with an acceptable mitigation plan for the 573 square feet of new impervious surface, is there any reason why the commission wouldn't approve the expansion as proposed?
I didn't see anything evident that would not support the expansion.
You're outside the 50 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well,
So in order to stay on the next agenda, Scott, in order to be on the agenda for April 20th, that will mean that materials will need to be submitted to us by this Friday. So if that's going to be difficult or not possible to do, then you'll want to continue out to the May 4th meeting.
yeah, let's go for the May 4th. Not because I can't come up with the plan by Friday, but getting it to the surveyor and getting it put on the site plan might take longer than that. He's pretty responsive, but it might take a little longer. So yes, let's do that. Thank you.
May 4th?
Great.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just for clarification, my intent is to find 573 square feet of lawn, which I just reseeded. But anyway, to eliminate that and plant some native shrubs and some, maybe native ground covers or something as mitigation for the project, rather than the other proposed mitigation that was conceived by me in an effort to protect the wetlands.
Very good.
Okay, and that's acceptable to you?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you,
Well,
Scott.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. All right, next up on the agenda is an administrative approval. Delia?
Yes. Let me just get there.
We have a certificate of compliance as well.
That got bumped off the agenda.
Oh, did it? Forgive me.
That
Okay.
was an update, Sarah, just
Thank you.
today.
Okay, sorry.
No.
Yeah, just waiting for some additional plantings for that. That was for the Chase Bank on Main Street. So let's see, the Land Trust has an easement over Mr. Ward's property here on Garfield Road, and this is Willow Guzzle here, the trail coming in from Willow Guzzle. If you take a left, and just as the trail goes up towards Garfield Road, there's a wet area here that the Land Trust is looking to put in. Do you see this photograph or the map?
The map.
Okay, let me just, I haven't figured out how to go between screens to share. So this is a photograph of the wet area. This is the section of trail that goes in through here. So it's about 50 feet of bog bridging that the Land Trust is looking to put in. They're proposing a double plank walk of rough sawn planks set on either half rounds or 6x6 PT lumber or half pipes. They might need to put in up to a foot or foot and a half of a crib box of supports where it's quite muddy in this area in here. And they'll either use stringers spiked into the support logs or use half pipes for that bog bridging. But that's really just to take care of an area of trail that has been just becoming more wet over time.
Nick, you gotta unmute
Are
yourself.
we,
now.
yeah, are we okay with pressure treated? In a wet area?
So pressure treated is a lot better than it used to be. It's still, it still is pressure treated with chemicals. It's no longer with arsenic. But yes, we have approved that in the past. We have used that ourselves in the past. So we are trying to use where we can cedar or locust or other, non-treated and sort of rot resistant, but we have done it ourselves and we have approved it in the past.
And we're okay with bog bridges. We like bog bridges. So maybe we're not supposed to talk about it now since their hearing's closed, but going back to the earlier discussion about no structures in the wetlands, could that couple consider a bog bridge if they just want their daughter to be able to experience nature, or would that still be considered a structure?
So a bog, maybe we should call bog bridges boardwalks, or, I mean, there's a little bit of, that structure was actually spanning a brook. So slightly different. We have approved those in the past where they're used for use of the public in a trail, system like along the Emerson Thoreau Amble or something like that. That's why I think for that project, Gary, I think it will be really helpful to do a site visit, because I think looking at whether it makes more sense to do.
Oh, she froze.
Yeah.
I think, Gary, to speak to that, that's why when I said about the bridge, that it was a private property and there was, what's the public benefit? How do you fill out that waiver and justify from that standpoint? Whereas something of this nature is clearly for a public benefit and quite not overly intrusive.
And also, might there be on a
concrete structure?
Oh, Delia, you
Lisa,
froze
yeah.
up for, you froze up for about 30 seconds.
I am so sorry. I just, I thought everybody else was frozen and I was.
no, that's too.
Inverse.
Yeah.
Now you're back.
Can I just build on the comment about public versus private walkway? I mean, with the situation we're looking at in this instance with the bog bridge that's being proposed, because it's a public trail already, would there potentially be more damage by not doing something here?
I think
Yes.
you're seeing it in the picture already with some of the bike tires and.
So you're
things of that
protecting the
nature.
you're protecting the wetlands by.
Yeah.
It'd be
And
worse
to
if
be
you
clear,
didn't do anything. Yeah.
To be clear, I have no objection to the bog bridge here. I think it's great. I use these trails and I'm very happy to see it go in. It's more, I'm reflecting back on what is it we're opposed to in the earlier circumstance. And it's, to me, it's the structure, the helical piles and, formal. And I'm wondering if this would be a solution, but I also hear what Greg and Sarah, what you're saying is that there's also no public benefit to providing the opportunity for a private walkway in a wetlands.
Yeah, and even there, you're spanning over, it looked like, open water versus a muddied condition as well.
It is that is spanning a brook for the Barrett's Mill project versus this just as a muddy spot.
Yeah.
The seasonally muddy spot, I would say. But yeah, case by case.
Ed, we have a public comment?
Yeah, I just want to make sure all the commissioners' comments.
Oh.
Okay, Ned?
Thank you, Ed. It seems to me the difference between the previous applicant and this applicant on bog bridges, and this is just a layman's observation, but bog bridges go where you can walk and it would be muddy versus a brook where you ordinarily wouldn't be able to walk without a bridge over it. So we put in bog bridges in Concord, and I put them in Maine, in paths that get broken down by bicycles, where you can ordinarily walk, but you wouldn't call a bridge across a brook where you couldn't walk without hip boots, a bog bridge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned.
Hope
Are
that's
there any
helpful.
other public comments regarding this? Administration approval?
No.
Okay. So I think we get the sense, everybody on the commission is good with this?
Yeah.
Okay. Delia, all set? Yeah, you're on mute.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, going to other business. So we have an updated tree removal and replacement policy. And along with that, Delia sent along some comment letters as well. So, and I know Delia, you had sent out a couple of other suggested changes. For example, more closely aligning at least the recognized trees having a certain minimum width, the 6-inch diameter. That's, I think, in lockstep with the town tree bylaw, which I think makes sense, right? Because there could be a slew of 1-inch saplings, you know, in jurisdiction as well. So the minimum size, and then again, I just raised the question about the invasive species, just to talk a little bit about that, because that also, it falls under, or is suggested to fall under, some type of mitigation as well. And I did speak to Delia earlier about this, and I was just wondering her perspective of this, i.e., you know, carbon sequestration is a benefit of any plant. But again, wanted to balance not wanting to turn anybody off from doing invasive removals, because we've seen a fair amount of projects that are really specific to that as well of recent. So again, a couple of perspectives there. And then I do know that the town bylaw has in lieu of planting new trees at a fairly significant cost, at least my perspective. And just wondering if that may want to also find its way here, not necessarily at those metrics necessarily, but it may be an avenue of option for the proposed homeowner or developer as well. So anyway, just a few comments to start the discussion.
I don't personally like the buying your way out of the problem, because it doesn't directly protect the wetland values. I don't, just my own opinion.
Okay.
So I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, I was going to say, I agree with the minimum DBH of 6 inches. I don't see the, you know, I think that our goal was to be consistent with the tree protection bylaw. And I think trying to be consistent where, you know, what you're going to have to mitigate for, or, you know, address should be the same. I don't think we want to, you know, penalize property owners more harshly or more stringently than the tree protection bylaw would for upland landowners. On the point about an alternative to mitigation, I agree with Nick. I don't like the idea of just being able to buy your way out, and I don't like the idea. Actually, I don't find the fees, the mitigation fees that we have for the tree protection bylaw to be a significant disincentive right now. I feel like, you know, developers probably don't even look at the fee that much, given where it's at, because I think it's similar in cost to just, you know, landscaping. But I do recognize that there are some practical difficulties in trying to mitigate when you have a entirely wooded lot that maybe only partially in or maybe entirely within the 100-foot buffer. So there would be a significant amount of area that would need to be mitigated for. And so what I was thinking, and I'm open to other commissioners' perspective, is what if we have it, so that the town staff, if the town staff determines that mitigation is not possible, or not feasible, or not practical, or something like that, then maybe monetary buyout option is available. Again, I would, try and make it consistent and use the same tree mitigation fund that, or the tree preservation fund that's in the other bylaw, but that's my thinking.
I just don't think that's practical, because given the cost of land in Concord and the cost of houses in Concord, what are you going to charge that's going to make any difference? $10,000 a tree?
Yeah.
I mean, even that wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah.
Oh, it may, depending on the tree count.
Look, it's different than what we have now, where there's no, at least maybe it'll make people think.
Well, I think we also want to look at, we're saying mitigation for taking down trees is to plant a tree. And are there other mitigating factors that we would consider? I mean, I think, we have a letter that suggested, what if the house went all electric, or somebody mitigated it in a different fashion? Do we want to foreclose them from being able to propose that?
Our job is to protect the wetlands values, not to do sustainability.
Well, wetland values, well, no, but the reason we're taking if the reason we're doing that, then it has nothing to do, doesn't have anything to do with the global warming issue of carbon and everything. I mean, you can't have it both ways. If we're protecting, if you had a row of trees at 99 feet, we just let people expand their houses into that. And I just think the gradation of what we've done is it might be considered a little harsh.
But that's
especially
why I'm
from our
just,
current policy.
I'm trying to make it more consistent with what we have in the tree protection bylaw. So if you put a
But
6-inch.
the tree protection
minimum
bylaw has nothing to do with wetlands. All along, I've not signed on to that, to have them be parallel, because they aren't parallel. As Nick said, our job is to protect the wetlands, and these other issues can be addressed in other fashions that are outside our purview, which happens all the time.
Although I'd say sometimes some of those suggestions might be outside our understanding as well. And also, I did see the suggestion that, maybe it's, moving to electric heat pumps, but I think people are moving that way anyway, to a degree.
Right.
I know it's not moving that fast, but I do know when a lot of people are building new or want to move that way, then that's really starting to become part of the sensibility out there. And then what's the next proposition that we have to analyze? So I would think it stays more focused in our wetlands jurisdiction, quite honestly, from my understanding of the discussion.
Yeah.
And then Delia, I think you also brought up another point, I think within the draft here, stump grinding. I think at times we've allowed stump grinding within the 25 to 50. And I think you had sent that along as a notation that probably is a common sense, modification we can make within the draft here as well.
I agree.
And will we look at this? Because we haven't had as many recently, but boy, for several years there, we were having plenty of them where people came back 3 or 4 years after they lived in their house and asked to take down numerous trees because they had been advised that they were dangerous to the house. Are we going to run into a situation where we have that again? Because if there's an economic feature here that you're going to take down some minimal trees, and that can be sort of counter to what we're probably going to end up having there anyways. And we're putting the burden on the buyer, I guess, to understand that that big pine tree that the builder didn't take down, or that the former owner didn't take down when they did the addition, has got to come down and they got to pay for it. I just see there's some economic burden here that we hadn't had before. Although I am mostly with it, frankly. But I think there's problems with it.
Yeah, although I think, Greg, to your question, there is a section about mitigation for hazard trees, et cetera, that we see quite often, as you know.
Right. But, okay, fine.
So open discussion. Any other comments from the commissioners on this?
Just
draft?
item four on page 3, it just says must be twice. It's a typo.
Oh.
Just to correct it.
Yeah, and I guess towards that end, I just had one suggestion too, at the top of page 2, second word, top sentence, commission may require. I think that should say will require, because it is a policy, but it also allows discretion in the next sentence. So the policy should state what we want to have accomplished, but again, discretion based on, particular issues of any application. All right, with that, I'll open it up to public comment. Yes, Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark White, 233 Independence Road, as well as owner of AWMW and BBC. We build quite a few homes in town each year. So you've got a couple of my memos in there. And it seems like this revised policy is more geared towards existing houses and really hasn't looked closely at what would happen or what would be the burden for a wooded, undeveloped lot that required or that is on a septic system as opposed to town sewer. We haven't been in front of you for these lots yet, but we do have a couple lots at the end of Sunnyside that fit that description. And I did a rough calculation based upon some plans that my engineers had done for me. And just between the 50 and the 100-foot buffer, if I followed this policy to the letter of the law, I would need to plant 60 2-inch trees in the jurisdictional area. If I understand that correctly, Delia, when you say that it has to be planted in the jurisdiction area, do you mean the wetlands or on that lot? And if it's in the wetland, I don't know where I would plant those. And I know we're trying to model this after the town preservation or the tree preservation bylaw, but keep in mind that that only applies to trees within the building setback, not the building envelope, so that they're not precluding you from building. And I get the fact that we're trying to protect the wetlands. And just to correct the comment, Gary, that you made that we don't take a look at the dollar value. Trust me, I scrutinize that. I have no idea how that number of 375 came up with for a 2-inch tree. It far exceeds the cost of a tree, but it's something that's in there and that we need to live with. So we do look at the economic value of that. And on these lots that I was referencing, that's going to be about probably $35,000, $40,000 per lot. And we constantly hear about the cost of homes going up and up and up. It's policies and procedures like this that we need to live with that is part of it. So what I would like the board to consider is between the 50 and the 100-foot buffer, why not stay with the policy that you currently have with a 1-to-1 mitigation? And if you disturb from the 25 to 50, go with this policy that you are proposing. Just keep in mind that if you take down your normal tree, we're not taking it down just because we want to take it down. We're taking it down because it needs to come down to build that house or the septic system or put in the well that we're trying to put in. So if you're taking down one tree that's 24 inches in caliper, you're going to be planting 6 new trees. So I don't understand how I would take down one tree and place 6 and have those 6 still not be in the way. Another thing, and it was my letter that had mentioned, if we're trying to, and I know your goal is to protect the wetlands, but I think if you are going with electric heat pumps, indirectly, you're creating less carbon and thereby you're protecting the wetlands. And you'd also be helping the town reach its climate goals. So at that point, that's pretty much most of what I had to say. But I'd like you to consider the 50 to the 100 foot as 1-to-1 mitigation.
Thank you, Mark. And Mark, just a question on the houses you build.
Mhm.
What kind of, do you put in electric heat pumps on your
We're
houses?
just starting. We're just starting, and I wish I had more experience with them because we're kind of delving into it. And we've got some experienced people doing it, but we're on our 3rd house that we're starting with electric heat pumps. So we're hoping it goes well. We've switched to induction stoves. Like I said,
Yeah.
we're hoping it works.
Well, I've got 2 systems
made
in 2 of my houses, and they do work well. And
Yeah.
I've got an induction stove too, and so far so good. So
We've made a
Anyway.
commitment to try to get to as much electric as we can. It's hopefully it's the right path.
thank you. So Mark does bring up that point of the 50 to 100 in terms of keeping our kind of 1-to-1 mitigation. Any thoughts offhand, just in regard to that?
Yeah, can I ask a question? I mean, isn't that what we're proposing already?
No,
No, I think we're looking at within the 100, Delia, correct me, but that also
Oh.
trees there as well.
Oh, I see. It's the hazard trees. The hazard trees we're proposing 1-to-1,
Correct.
but the healthy trees, it's 50%. What?
That's right. So hazard trees, we're encouraging homeowners to mitigate 1-to-1 or leave a snag or plant some shrubs. No requirement to do so, but outside of being a hazard, if it's request to remove healthy trees, then it is at the 50% caliber.
Could we
Right,
just,
no.
That's what's currently in the draft now. So that's what's
Right.
up for discussion. Yeah.
could we talk a bit more about the invasive species piece? Because I am maybe concerned that this is, we want people to take out invasive species. So I don't know, what are your thoughts, Delia, on that? Are you just worried that we're going to end up with nothing left? If all the invasives are taken out, then there might not be anything
Well,
left.
Right. So, I mean, if I think about this on a sort of site by site, say you have a property and it has 2 or 3 large Norway maples that,
Right.
they're providing some carbon sequestration and perching sites for raptors. And,
Okay.
there's some value, some shading that is being provided.
Stormwater.
Shouldn't there be some
Yeah, no,
mitigation?
okay, when you think of it like that, yeah,
but-
makes sense.
But so that's why I suggested it at 25% rather than 50%. But maybe that number is too high because we want to encourage people to take out Norways as much as possible. And if we go, especially with including a 6-inch DBH minimum, then if somebody had a whole bunch of saplings in the corner of their property that was just 2 inches or 4 inches, and they wanted to take those out because they recognized that they were bad, great.
Yes.
But maybe the 25% is too high and it should be 10%. Maybe that's it.
I'm okay with the mitigation levels. But I am sensitive to Mark's point about what we're doing is making some lots unbuildable. And again, I recognize Greg doesn't put a lot of stock in this, but in trying to think about making this more commensurate with the tree protection bylaw, Mark has a point that there is a setback requirement in the tree protection bylaw, which we're not including here. And I wonder if we should be thinking about, mitigation only for trees in the setback, so the 50 to 100, obviously you're not building in the 50, but between 50 and 100, maybe we should be mitigating only for, trees in the setback
Right.
versus
You
the
mean from the-
buildable area of a lot. I don't know.
From the wetlands to the 50, right, Gary? That's what you're thinking? Because those are no build and obviously no disturb.
Right, from the wetlands to the 50, there's no building in there anyway, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
So it's from the 50 to 100 where, it's still within the buffer area. And are we requiring mitigation for taking out trees in the 50 to 100?
Right.
I have a question for Mark along those lines. When you do those calculations on Sunnyside, you're talking about trees that have to be removed just because they're within the footprint of the structure or the structures?
No,
Or-
those are the trees that fell within the 50 to 100-foot buffer. These lots are narrower, deeper lots, so that they're not that wide, smaller homes. But it was the trees that were within the 50 to 100.
Well, no, but did you just go through and say every tree within the 50 to 100 or just the
Yes.
ones that?
Yes.
Why, but you can't build in there. Oh, you can build in there. So you're going to build
Yeah,
in
the
the 50 to 100. You're going to build in all of the 50 to 100? I'm trying to
No, I took it,
understand.
I don't have the houses designed at this point. But once again, with that narrow house, with the septic system, we're probably taking down 60 to 70% of those trees.
Okay, here's what I'm trying to get at is, do builders take down trees just because they take down trees? In other words, they aren't within the footprint of the house. They're not within the footprint of the septic system. Is that part of what you perceive as the problem, that these extra trees, or are you just talking about trees that you absolutely have to take down to build the structure within the 50 to 100?
Once again, I don't have the house designed.
Okay.
So I was trying to make a point. I think that if
So
you.
that's where it's hard to understand your point, because if you don't have an actual
I've got a
example.
plot, Nick, I've got a plot plan that shows a house design on it.
Yeah.
That is pretty common with most of the houses that we do design.
Okay.
So I've been doing this for quite some time. I know which
Okay,
trees
so-
need to come. I'm
So
sorry.
is just the tree count based on what you think the house is going to be, where it's
Correct.
going to be? So it's
And
just the trees
it's a
that,
pretty accurate footprint,
okay, so it's the
but I
trees,
don't have it designed yet.
it's the trees within the footprint of the house roughly.
Well, but I would think I think it's more expansive than that.
Ed,
though,
if I
because
could
you
You've got to have space all the way around your
Yeah,
house,
okay.
otherwise.
Walkways, driveways.
I'm just trying to find out if there are gratuitous trees in this calculation, that's all.
And I'm sure there are a couple that would not be cut.
Okay.
We don't, if you,
Okay, so you pretty
I
much.
think
okay.
if I could finish, I think I've earned a reputation that I don't go in and clear cut any of my lots. I see the value environmentally as well as financially in keeping a tree. So we don't come in any situation and clear cut trees. I'm constantly going back and removing trees that I should have removed in the first time.
Okay, thank you.
So if I could, I'd just like to emphasize the point that the board keeps saying 25, 50%. But keep in mind, if that's a 12-inch tree, which is a pretty common sized tree, that's really 6 inches that we need to mitigate for. So as a minimum, that's 3 trees. So even though you're only doing 50% of the caliber, you're actually 3 more trees. And if you want the tree to be healthy, you've got to provide a place for it to grow. Otherwise, you're going to be crowding trees and the canopies they're going to become hazardous trees in 15 to 20 years.
No, I think it's a fair point you raised, Mark, within the 50 to 100. So.
And
Appreciate
so
you
what
bringing that
about,
up.
yeah, what about
Gary, yeah, go ahead.
the setback idea?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Gary's idea may make that all work in the sense. But I think I think Gary's idea, as much as I wasn't thinking of it to be aligned with the tree but preservation bylaw and still don't. I see it as focusing on the wetlands and from a practical standpoint, what works best for all. And maybe obviously it would help to align in Gary's mind with the tree bylaw too, if you did setbacks. Because you are taking down for septic
Well, when
and
you say-
everything else otherwise.
Gary, when you say setbacks, what do you mean specifically in regard to that, though?
I think mainly we're talking about residency properties. I mean, I don't know, maybe this falls apart when you're talking about, residence AA and they've got, 20 acres. And all we're going to be doing is protecting the setback. So, I don't
Right.
know, but I'm just thinking out loud that, for residency, thinking of this Sunnyside Lane example, if you have 100% of a lot that's wooded,
Yeah.
Mark's right. You've made it unbuildable, right? Because 50% of this lot, the 50 feet out by the road, it's all covered. If he has to mitigate for every single 1-inch tree, that's going to be a burden. If we only are talking about the trees that are 6 inches or bigger, that takes care of a lot of it. But also, maybe we do want to allow outside of the setbacks, there's an area where he should be able to build.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
take
a good
those
point.
trees down.
Well,
because
when you
private
do
property.
it, interesting enough, when you do a bylaw like, a policy change like this, and you get very finite and mathematical, it does take discretion away from all parties. And I think we find that, and I know we have spoken about watching somebody want to have, like the pool, that swimming pool, area that, they're 50 feet, 1/8 of an inch from the wetlands. Why? Because no, you can't go inside 50. So we go 50 and 1/8 of an inch. And I think when you have bylaws and rules and regulations that get really down to the math, you do take all the burden, you do take the flexibility of analyzing things as they come in terms of some sort of standards, but not so finite that you say, well, we can't stop you because that's what the rule says. That so somebody comes in and takes the trees. I doubt the trees won't come down. It's just what's the impact to everybody about it. They'll leave a few, but if it costs money, I mean, I'm sorry, but houses are so bloody expensive. Maybe Mark will wise up and stop building, but no, you will not stop builders. The price will just go up on the back end, and you'll go up. So it does seem like you have more influence if you have some discretion and set it towards a policy that has some discretion. That's been my opinion all along, but that has to do, and that I haven't seen an inordinate amount of trees come down in general on non-new homes. And new homes, I understand why they're coming down. I think they're going to come down anyway.
Mark, do you have a
And we're going to
question?
plant, and we'll plant others. And I think could require when you're above whatever, some kind of a limit, then you have to show some sort of mitigating with tree plantation, et cetera, and therefore let the person invent a way that we may not think of right now, instead of just, you got to put 75 trees in the buffer zone or something.
Yeah. Mark, you have a comment?
No, my hand didn't, it's always been up, but for some reason do I take
Take it
that down?
down.
Okay. Oh, I do that. Sorry, I thought you
Okay.
did that.
Thank you. All right.
Well said.
Anyway, any, if the commission's done for the moment, any public comment regarding the policy? All right, hearing none. Mark, thank you for the input. Very much appreciated.
Was this, I do have a question. Is this going to come back for review?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think, good food for thought. I think we'll further the draft and then bring it back again.
I also want to point out, we are in effect instigating a financial burden on landowners here. And the tree bylaw came in front of town meeting to do that. I think we do have to find a way to let the public know this is our intent.
I do have a question there with that.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
Because I think I'm one of the few people in town that are aware of this policy. And I just happened to catch it out of the blue when I was meeting with Delia one day. I realized it's a policy change, and I think that you're obviously following the right procedures, but in certain situations, this could have a severe financial detriment to a lot of people. So, and I also would like to I know you said that installing heat pumps is not really your purview or concern, but the state is trying to get people to do that. And there was an article in the Concord Journal a few weeks ago that I mentioned in my letter. None of the existing owners are doing it because I think it's something new. So if there was another incentive for them to switch to a heat pump, it may get that ball rolling. So I'll end it there.
Okay.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
time.
Mark. Mark?
Hello,
Other Mark.
thanks. Yes,
Yeah.
the other Mark. Thanks, Mark Ailes, 62 Prescott Road. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of endorse what Mark said too, and also I think one of the board members, commission members mentioned that I didn't know about this until I happened to be at this meeting, and it'd be good to circulate some drafts or some ideas so that there's more public input and maybe some other ideas about how to balance all these interests. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Next order of business, warrant article
So
review.
Ed,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, before we go off that, how would the commission like to proceed? Do you want to send me individual comments and I will work them into the draft? Do you want me to scrap it and start from scratch? What would
No, I
you-
wouldn't. I think people can send individual comments to you, Delia, and then we can also discuss how to. I think it's a fair point too that to publicize this policy, and how to do that. We can discuss that as well. So why don't we send comments into Delia? Look at a draft. We'll of course bring it back, but I think it's a fair comment to understand in a broader sense in town.
Yeah, may I ask Delia, so if the previous bylaws have gone to town meeting, why wouldn't we have to do that with this?
This isn't
So
a
the
bylaw.
difference is that, yeah, the difference is that this is a policy.
Okay,
and
okay.
Like the 50-foot no build zone policy that we went through some
Yes,
iterations
yes.
with a few years ago. It's just something that gets noticed on an agenda, but it's true. It does.
But if there's financial implications, I
Policy
guess
does not have the
that's, yeah.
same teeth as a bylaw, right?
Okay.
So that's why it doesn't require the town meeting approval. It's a policy. It is, you know,
Okay.
anybody that wants to appeal it, we don't have any legal, there's no legality, there's nothing legal to stand on. But I mean, people have been very respectful in general of our policies, and we would like that to continue. And I think that's a valid point that, you know, we put it on an agenda, but who thinks to look on our agendas? And, you know, I mentioned it to Mark because we were talking about the Sunnyside Lane project. But, you know, there's lots of other people in town who would like to weigh in. So we can think about how better to publicize. I mean, we could put a legal notice into the journal. We could put an article into the paper. There's lots of ways that we could do that, but I certainly think public input is beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Delia. All right, warrant
Welcome.
article review. We've got 7 here that we've posted for consideration, whether to support or not at town meeting. So why don't we just run right down those, starting with Article 25, which is the Assabet River Bluff Preservation Project. So certainly, seems like, obviously we've talked about it before. We've looked at the plans. I think we've been supportive. I know I'm supportive. Anybody have any particular comments in regard to that in terms of support or non-support? Nick?
Very strong support. After watching the select board meeting, I was furious. And I think we need to send the strongest possible message to the town and the select board of our support for this.
Thank you, Nick.
I didn't, what are you referring to, Nick, if you don't mind? I didn't see the. I
Last
don't-
night, was it last night, Delia? Was it last night?
Monday.
Yeah, Monday night. The select board discussed this article and they were second guessing the work done by people and, you know, whether or not they pushed hard enough for enough units on the property. And what's, in my opinion, unfortunate ignorance of what's happened. And I just really was offended by that.
Yeah, there's been endless discussions on this article.
Yeah, and the
I
work
know there
leading
were
up to
people
it
that
as
felt
well.
that there was woefully small housing for the effort and energy, but I guess that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it just, the fact that this could be a much worse project if it was just turned loose and sold to the highest bidder seems to somehow have escaped the select board. And
It went through so many iterations to take everything into consideration.
yeah, so I think every committee should just send the strongest possible message at town meeting about their support for this.
So I think we're clear on that. Article 25, Delia, in regard to.
We have to take a vote.
Yes, I think the only
Yeah.
question that I would have about this is, would the commission, do you want to make a statement on the floor of town meeting? And if so, I will draft something up for your review.
Yes, I would.
Yes.
I think we should take a formal vote on this one. I move that we urge the town meeting to support this
Affirmative action.
article.
Take affirmative action.
Affirmative action, but I think we need to make a statement as well.
There was a second.
Second.
Thank you. And the vote, Greg,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. All right, Article 26. The
Well,
community
yeah.
preservation.
Article 26 is the funding for.
Oh, it's the
Article
funding, yeah.
25.
So it's hand in hand with it.
Oh, yeah.
So wouldn't. sorry,
But
so
it
we
includes
roll
some
this-
other open space funding as well, so.
Yeah. Seems like it's kind of hand in hand with Article 25, among other things.
But I think, reflecting what Nick just said, like the CPC committee has spent a lot of time thinking about all these projects and they've done their homework. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't, provide affirmative support for the Junction Village open space, the Assabet Bluffs open space, the Assabet River pedestrian bridge, which is, I guess, an installment of, what's already been discussed. These are all, town plans that have been in furtherance of our open space goals. So I think we should support it.
I agree.
Agreed.
So
Do you
I
want to take a
move
vote on,
that
do you want to take a vote on
yeah.
each article?
Oh,
Is
I
that
think
the
you have-
Julie, do
desire
you
of
want
the
us to take a
commission?
vote on ever?
You have to. If you're
I
gonna-
think that would be best.
Okay,
So I move that the NRC urge town meeting to take affirmative action on Article 26.
I second that.
thank you, Sarah. And Greg,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Sarah,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I am an aye as well. Article 30, Scenic Roads General Bylaw. Commentary on this?
No.
Well, I think it pertains to the public way and having oversight on scenic roads from being on the Public Works. I think we've, years ago, we did Strawberry Hill. We didn't have anything like this and it was a bit difficult to navigate, but this might help us navigate on these roads to, have some jurisdiction over trees and all that sort of jazz. So I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, I would be in favor of it as well, to Greg's point.
Is there an NRC
Aspect to
rationale?
it? I that's why I mentioned tree, only from the standpoint that I would believe that it would give control over a lot of the things that we would care about, meaning trees and, crossings and what people did with the public way,
So it's more general support than it is maybe specifically in jurisdiction.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily essential that we vote on.
Yeah, I don't, do we need, I don't know, do we need to take a statement? Like, I mean, the other one, we need to take a statement, but I don't know.
I don't think that connection
No.
is strong enough for our
No,
interest.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm inclined to take no position just because I think it's more for public works and planning board,
Mhm.
but I don't care. I mean, if people want to vote, I'm in support of the article, but.
Yeah, same here. I just don't, I
That's my
just don't,
point, yeah.
yeah.
So we're generally supportive, but it doesn't raise to the level to take a vote.
Right.
Okay,
That's what I would agree with. Mhm.
okay, fair enough. Article 34.
I'm sorry, everyone.
What's that, Delia?
No,
It's
Oh,
frozen again.
Yep,
Gross, yeah.
I'm just trying to get to it. Yeah, after Thoreau. So this was the citizens petition zoning map amendment. I think it was dealing with their specific residents and moving it out of the industrial zoning to more residential zoning to loosen up some ability to build on I think the lot they might have purchased adjacent to them, if that's how I
oh, yeah,
read it
there,
correctly.
it's the one on Virginia Road.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Once again, I don't think that's strongly in our
I agree. It's just
in our corner.
okay. Do we want to be supportive of it or do we just want to take no action? I would, I don't see how it affects us, so
No.
No
No,
position.
take no position.
no position. Article 35, I think this is the zoning bylaw for the section 10 planned residential development update. This does tie in a little bit in terms of, I think, if there's wetland on and what can count as
Open space.
open space and or not open space.
Hmm.
And again, I think having read the planning board, I briefly read the planning board's position and their concern, I think, was that it may dissuade this type of building. And so you don't get certain requirements or obligations that come along with this planned development, such as affordability and housing diversity, diversification types of housing typology, et cetera. So I think that they voted no action on this one. So just to raise their perspective as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're gonna probably not get PRDs if you don't.
If you push this.
I think if you go to 75% open upland, we're not doing well on PRDs.
In general, I mean, while there is a little bit of a NRC dog in this fight, I guess, my inclination would be to defer to the planning board. Like they're the ones who should be setting zoning regulations, not individual citizen petitions. So, I mean, citizens should all vote on zoning articles, but I feel like changes to zoning should come through the planning board process where they have time to consider the pros and cons of a article.
It appears it'll be no action on this as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Well, but no action is different than no position.
No position.
No position.
Oh, no position. Yeah.
No position.
I mean, yeah, okay. I mean, I might be inclined to say no action. Like I don't, yeah, anyway, we can just take no position.
Okay.
Let the planning board speak.
All right, then we have Articles 46 and 47. So 46, so Reformatory Branch Trail feasibility study is Article 46. So anyway, I guess I'll just jump in here and I guess I don't see the value in this necessarily. I think the Reformatory Branch Trail works well today. Obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about its value, in terms of, habitat for Blanding's turtles, other species, et cetera, not increasing the speed of bicycles that go down that Reformatory Branch Trail at a fairly fast clip today. So anyway, my position would be either no action, no position, but again, other thoughts, perspectives?
I would vote for no action.
No position or no action? No.
No
Yeah,
action
there
as
there
in
is a
against it.
difference. I
Yeah.
mean, no action is saying we don't think this should pass.
Yes,
No
I'd say
position
it's
is
a no
saying we're not
action.
taking a position.
No
Okay,
action
fine.
is what I'm
No
proposing,
action then, from my perspective.
and mine.
I would. So we're going to vote for no action? Someone moving that?
I make a move to vote no action on Article 46.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And the vote, Greg?
I thought we were going to take no position, so I haven't even thought that through.
Sorry about that.
I guess at this point, do I want to spend $75,000 to petition? No, I don't know enough to really, I got a letter sent to me about this, but I just don't know about the value to the bikers to warrant 75,000. So I guess I'll agree. No action.
No action. Gary?
Yeah, so I was thinking about it this afternoon also, and I guess, from my perspective, doesn't matter what I think as a citizen of Concord with my commissioner hat on. I'm trying to say, what is the NRC value here that we are protecting? And
That's what I'm doing.
yeah, and so I guess, the letter from Dr. Windmiller did sway me. There are some, sensitive ecosystems involved, so I will vote no action. So I guess.
Thank
In
you.
support
Sarah?
of-
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. All right, our last article, Article 47. Preserve Concord's Reformatory Branch Trail. So, on the other hand,
Yeah, I mean, here, I guess I feel like I would take no position. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
this is for the citizens of Concord to decide. I feel like I could have an opinion one way or the other, but this is not about, funding a feasibility study. It's about
Mhm.
expressing an opinion about the value of the trail, and I would just take no position.
I'll agree.
I concur. I totally concur.
Mhm.
okay. So no position. All right, that wraps up the warrant review. And then I guess the last item on the agenda is the Concord Land Conservation Trust proposed well installation at the Hubbard Brook Conservation Area. So I think we have Joan here this evening and Steve as well.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Joan.
Hi. I'm hoping you've all had a chance to see the letter that explains what this proposal is about, so I won't review that. I think what we're hoping, because Steve is proposing to make quite an investment in this and putting in the well and all that entails. So I think we just wanted to be clear that your interpretation of the conservation restriction as it pertains to this is similar to ours, so that Steve, we might let Steve move forward, without jeopardizing his investment in this.
And Joan, will you just give us 2 sentences of that interpretation on your end regarding the irrigation aspect? I think it is within the conservation restriction.
Right. So if you've read the conservation restriction, which I'm not sure you have, under the reserved rights section. So this is things that we have the right to do. And then there's an entire paragraph that permits various agricultural activities. And then within that, there are subsections that allow underground water and electrical lines, as we're talking about, and the seasonal use of above ground pipes and other irrigation equipment to water crops. And then it says that then in a typical conservation restriction fashion, it says, however, except for fences, these are things that are permitted, except for fences, troughs for livestock, utility lines, and irrigation equipment, nothing shall permit the construction of any structures, including without limitation, any barn, garage, shed, greenhouse, stable, or indoor riding ring. So, okay.
Gotcha.
And, okay, so it's, I don't know how many of you have worked with conservation restrictions. They're quite specific, and you have to pay a lot of attention to the language. And at the same time, you know, we need to recognize that when these were drafted, and I think I was probably around when this was drafted, it's very difficult to cover all eventualities that might arise in the future. So I think what we're suggesting is that the system that Steve is putting in would be considered the compression tank and the control panel for the electricity would be considered as irrigation equipment.
Gotcha. Yeah, again, just reading through it and, you know, just the various discussion, it seems to make perfect sense, you know, in terms of, you know, my initial impact. I just had one quick question. Just how big would that control panel and shed be, just for my edification? Is it 4 feet by, you know, 5 feet high by 2 feet wide, or?
No, Steve,
Be approximately 4 feet wide by maybe 5 feet high.
So a big dog house, basically, not
Yeah.
not much more than that. So, okay,
Right.
thank you.
and so what you're talking about, the control panel or
Yeah.
the, yeah,
And the tank.
and narrow, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Any of the commissioners have comments, perspective on this?
It all sounds consistent with the agricultural use that was intended by the conservation restrictions. So
I totally agree.
Okay.
Do we need a vote?
I would appreciate a vote, I
Yes.
think.
Would you? Okay. Do you have a, Greg, you want to make
I
a
make a
motion on
motion
this?
to approve, I make a motion to approve the well in all its encumbrances on the property, on Hubbard Field or whatever it's called.
Hubbard Brook
Second.
Conservation?
Harvard Brook Conservation. I don't have it in front of me. So,
We call it Hubbard Brook Farm Field.
well, then we're going to call it the Hubbard Brooks Farm Field.
Thank you.
and I'll second.
And I amend my motion to say that.
Thank you, Gary. And the vote, Greg,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Nora,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
and I'm an aye, and I am an aye as well. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Okay.
So with
bye-bye.
that, I believe we are wrapped up. So we'll move to adjourn. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Right.
Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Goodbye.